everybody.
What's up?
Welcome back. It's Monday Night Live with Dr. Deb and Dr. Joe. I'm so glad you decided to join us. We have some fabulous guests today, people that are near and dear to our hearts. We've been good friends for a long, long time, but that friendship came after a journey that we took to get you healthy. And that led us into functional medicine. So I know we've dragged a lot of you on here because we know that so many need to hear the message that the Pompas are going to be talking about today. They themselves have been through a journey that took them from pain to purpose, right, guys? Yep. So I want to introduce these two, Dr. Dan and Merily Pompa. Dr. Dan started as a chiropractor many, many years ago, about the same time as us, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Around the same time. And since, I'm going to let them tell their story, but since then, they have created Health Centers of the Future, which is where we began our training in functional medicine. They also have, and that's a program for doctors. So they're teaching doctors how to do the things that we do, that they do also with patients. But they also have a patient side. And if you haven't ever heard of Cellular Healing TV, I want you to write that down, Cellular Healing TV. And we'll put a link on here later on so everyone can jump on and check it out. But everything that you want to know, everything that's research scientific about different healthcare issues, things that you guys are dealing with every single day, people that you know, their children, you're going to find it on Cellular Healing TV. And then they also have a program that they've put out there for people to make it really accessible for people to get the help that they need when they're not just in a place of maintaining health, but they're in a place of despair, desperation, or illness, not feeling like themselves and not getting any better. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Dan Pompa and Merily Pompa, and I would love for you guys to share your story with us.
Yeah, welcome, man.
Well, I always say, she really is the one that coined from pain to purpose to promise, and maybe we'll have a chance to explain the promise part because somebody said, well, you're from pain to purpose. You're hanging on to the pain. We had to give it the promise that God had for us. And one of which, by the way, when I was sick, God not verbally spoke to her, but spoke to her heart that not only was I going to get well, that I was going to take a message to the world. And as you know, I'm training doctors around the world. Everything that came out of my own battle, which started about 1999, 2000. And, that was what changed my life. I mean, I was, some people look back at their life and say I was sick all my life. That wasn't me. I was considered the healthy person. And then all of a sudden life changed. I had a very busy practice at the time, arguably the best shape of my life. And life came to a screeching halt. Bizarre symptoms. And I'll just, I won't go through the whole story, but it started with fatigue, just like so many people. And then it went from fatigue to anxiety, to brain fog, to digestive problems that just intolerant to all these different foods. And, like most people listening that go through that, you start looking at everything. My adrenals were wiped out. My thyroid was malfunctioning, even though my blood work was normal. But right. And yeah, absolutely. And, but I would address those things. Some things got better, but I wasn't well, because I really hadn't figured out the cause. And unfortunately, I suffered for about 4 years before I really figured out that cause. But in everything I learned, that's what I teach. Go ahead, Deb.
Well, I was going to say, and as a chiropractor, as chiropractors, we know what it takes to stay healthy in general, and so for all of those years, you were probably fighting to get to a healthy state from what you knew.
Yeah, and because of my philosophy, I was, not going to cover up the symptoms. And there's a time and a place. So, those people who say, well, I have to, maybe you do, because sometimes the symptom is worse than the stress, but I'm going to tell you, I would go to doctors like many people and looking for an answer for myself. And when your blood test looks normal after spending $5,000 on blood tests, with a few little things off, I really wanted them to find cancer, something, anything, because what started being diagnosed was, well, it's in your head. And when you leave there with a prescription for a psychotropic drug, I didn't even leave there with it. I'd be like, keep it. My philosophy drew me to the fact that I wasn't just crazy. There was something wrong. Oh, believe me, there were times where I was saying to her, "Are you sure I'm not just crazy?" And she was like, "You're not crazy. There's something wrong." So it's hard. It is.
One of the things I admire about both of you is you walk the walk. And I think in a world today where there's so much information and there's so much coming out of us, and we're talking about the 7 pillars of a successful life, I would love for you to give some of the fundamental things, especially in the world we're living in today, which we've had many conversations around this, of like, how do we do this health thing in today's world, navigate through the world, and yet still come out the other side healthy or even stronger, right? I think that's something, because, I've been around you guys a long time. You do the research, you do the homework, you go after it, you live the lifestyle. And so you're living in that realm. And I think for some people, they get lost in the shuffle of it all and they don't know where to go and what to do next. And I think there was really, when we thought of this, was no two better people to come up there and be like, guys, this is how you can actually navigate through this, especially in today's world, what we're living in now.
Well, I think
there's so much confusion, and that's why there's that.
Right. And I think people have to really know that the sources they're listening to don't have an agenda or a bias in what they're sharing with you. So I think the most important thing and the way to do that is by digging for your own information. I don't care what news outlet you listen to, whoever is sponsoring what they're airing is whose agenda is being sold to.
But by the way, on that note, I have a saying. It's called the 180-degree solution. You know what the solution is? I'm going to simplify your life for you. Watch TV, read the newspapers, the magazines, everything it says about health, do 180 degrees opposite, and you have the truth every darn time. Okay, there's the answer. We can start.
We're done.
Thanks a lot.
And the other thing is take care of yourself and have confidence in your immune system and don't be afraid to get sick. Oh, and don't bring down a fever unless you're turning blue.
Oh my gosh, she just went over she just violated everybody's whole philosophy, right? Because what she said there was, wait, getting sick is actually good. Oh yeah, believe it or not, we actually believe that, and so do our kids, and so do you all. But that is a different philosophy because, the fact is, listen, when this whole thing started, and I'm not going to say the thing, I'm not going to, get anything, in trouble here, but that when the first thing started, I actually sat and read 4 different studies, and I did a Facebook, and the studies were to show that kids exposed to more pathogens were actually healthier and had less autoimmune, less cancer, and less autoimmune gut problems later in life. Now, I know that runs contrary in today's environment, but unfortunately, it is in fact the truth. And somebody that knows and spends a lot of time with kids just the other day said, you wouldn't believe what's happening. Kids are now getting all these crazy reactions and things of that sort. Why? Because we're trying to run from things. We're trying to, not be exposed.
And they're not getting exposed, right?
Yeah. So that's a principle that may be absolutely different. Trust what God has done in your body. And believe it or not, there is a defense mechanism that we call our microbiome. And it is there to protect you. And believe it or not, the more exposure, the better. That was really getting ground for, I would say, the last 20 years, especially the last 10 years with new research, et cetera. And I feel like we've lost a lot of ground on that.
Out of fear, because of fear.
But I don't want it to be about this because everyone's caught in that.
And we talked about this earlier before we came on the air. And this thing it's just sparked a thing in me. Like we were away on vacation with you guys and I just saw it from a different light. And I was just like, you know what, man? No one's speaking to children in this healthcare realm. Like they're seeing all this information from the outside of what, from an outside in philosophy and not living from an inside out philosophy. And, I think parents don't know how to have that conversation with them guys, and they don't know how to raise their kids inside that realm. And I think it's a big deal. Like, I don't think it's a little deal. I think it's a really big deal. and we're missing it by a mile.
Well, here's the
I'd
thing.
love to hear you guys' thoughts on that.
Look, it's a big deal because I worry for the future of this generation, what we're teaching them, right? And look, there's plenty of science around what I'm saying, even though it goes contrary to what you're hearing right now. That doesn't mean what you're hearing right now is true. One of the things that the four of us operate around is a very, very different major premise than what's out there. So when I have this conversation with parents or anybody, the first thing you have to say is like, okay, you have to kind of identify what is their major premise, right? If your major premise is, hey, look, man is going to come up with the answer, and that pill, powder, potion, lotion is going to be the answer, or that's what your protection. I can live the life I want to live because the answer lies there. See, we're not going to see eye to eye. But when your major premise is, God created us in such a way with such an incredible intelligence that man cannot duplicate. See, now you live life from that perspective. You live life from that major premise. So here's the warning. If your major premise is flawed, that means every decision you make under there is potentially flawed. Typically it is. But if you start with the right major premise, then it leads you to very different conclusions. So when the whole thing started, and my thing was, hey, we're not avoiding this as a family. We're going to live life as a family. We're going to pay attention to this, and we are not afraid of it. As a matter of fact, we're going to get exposed. Guess what? We lived our life accordingly. You see, but it started with a different major premise. So everything we talk about, we're running through that major premise, Joe.
And then you can raise your family and teach them. Now, your kids are older now, but they've known this their entire lives. And all of the kids of the doctors that we were on vacation with, our friends, all of the kids of all ages, there was no fear factor. They all come from a level of faith, understanding that the power that made this body has the power to heal this body. And, our history tells us, basically, if you really read the research and you really look at the truth of the matter, bring on the virus, bring on the bacteria, we're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah, you can tell I'm even afraid to use the word virus. You used it already because, I literally am that afraid of getting this shut down, because if you're not part of the agenda or your speak or your language, then you really risk getting shut down. So that's why I'm being very careful, and we need to be careful because of that.
We gave birth to our babies at home, right? Our youngest is 17. Our oldest biological, he's almost 23. And our twins that we got when they were 7 are now 24. And we have honored what we have understood based on study, not just based on, in fact, it was in complete conflict to the way I was raised. And, it took me a while, and I didn't care if I convinced my mother that the way I was raising my family was right. I had confidence in the paradigm that I was living by because I had a husband that was educated on the topic and did the research from both sides, made decisions accordingly. And, over time, living out those decisions, 30 years later, our anniversary is coming up on Tuesday of 25 years, and we dated.
Right.
Thank you. So we have been together a long time, and I don't care how other people live their lives, but don't tell me, facts tell, but stories sell. This is our story. It is our life. And when he got sick and we were doing this life, basically, if God made it, it's good for you. And if man messed with it, stay away from it. That was our basic premise within this sphere of natural health. And when he got sick, it was like all of a sudden, oh my gosh, now we're confronted with what else is there? Because the basics we know to do, we have in place.
So let's put a cap on this circle of this. First thing I would do, as your family, I would get your kids together, and you have to give them this talk on major premise. Truly, God gave you a body that heals. Right. And when your kids start to really understand that, my kids don't ask for medications. They don't ask to go to doctors. They don't ask for things when they're sick. They have something inside them says, I'm actually getting healthier. So the point is number one, start by changing your family, your kids' premise about health. And I think that'll determine the rest of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, I was very blessed I kind of had two sides of a story. I had parents that listened to my uncle, who was the first chiropractor of now 13 in my family. They listened to him, and they didn't vaccinate me. But my mom didn't breastfeed, and she smoked like a chimney. So, and then, you know, it was a little confusing growing up. But as soon as I actually went to chiropractic school and I started learning the real premise behind what it is that my uncle was doing, it was like a no-brainer. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, like, thank God I didn't get the vaccines. But on the other side of things, you know, I was doing it all wrong. And so learning the basics of living a healthy lifestyle, when you really understand the true meaning of it, it does have the potential to change your life if you take action on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And those around you. Right?
Yeah.
So I have an analogy, and I think people live in this, I think can relate to this, and this is a good way to kind of correlate. So I think what happens, we're born and we're told that we're in a boat and we can't swim, and we're born with the life preserver on. And we come along and we're like, hey, no, that this body was meant to swim and it's meant to get in the water, and it's okay to do that. And it takes often time and trust to let people to take off the vest or even just to get in the water. And then once they get in the water and they realize that their body is able to swim, often what happens is they start to drift away from the boat. And then all of a sudden they realize that they're further away from the boat than they thought, and they're in the water by themselves, and they often will have a challenge of health of some sort, right?
You know, Joe, to take that analogy to current day right now, we have someone who is actually knew they could swim and was swimming and all was wonderful. And then there was a trauma. You know, in other words, you know, maybe there was close to drowning incident, and now they're afraid to swim again. So right now we have to put the vest back on. Everything you just said has to be retrained in the generation right now, because everyone's afraid again because of the trauma and the fear that was created. And, you know, look, you know, nobody wants to get sick, you know, but the fact is everybody is going to be exposed. Everybody's going to get this. You're not going to stop it. So where's your health at? Which brings the next part of the conversation.
Yeah. So we wanted you to bring to us, you know, 5, I know there's a million, but maybe 5 takeaways, if you can find some thoughts in there that people can take away with them to live on a healthy or on a daily basis, things that they can do on a daily basis with their families, teach their children, even as they walk the path of life, that they can do in their daily walk.
Well, I'm going to set her up for this, because if you went to dinner, and you have been to dinner with us, everyone pauses at the table. Somehow the waiter or waitress ends up over here at Merily.
It's an experience.
Yeah, she goes through the rant. Now, there's a reason for the rant. Because the rant has, you know, we have understood the science of this one really dangerous thing. Then most people might go, oh, yeah, I heard about that. But you all don't realize how dangerous it is. But because it's so dangerous, she goes on her rant. Huh? What's the rant?
Well, it depends. I am allergic to vegetable oil and or canola oil.
But she's not.
But
right. That's
okay,
the statement.
You're blowing my cover.
Oh.
and by the way, you all benefit, right?
Yeah.
Unless you opt out, but you all benefit because you eat like we do.
So why are you saying you're allergic to vegetable oil?
Because it creates cellular dysfunction in your body, not just for the meal or until it's digested, but for like how many months?
Yeah, well, 3 months. Over
isn't that
3
crazy?
months. Yeah, estimates 130 some days. Here's the point. You can make an exception with sugar, maybe, if you go out to dinner.
Sure.
Right? Your body burns it up. A few hours later, it's burned up. You get a glucose spike. Not great, but your body deals with it. These types of fats, they get inside your cells and they create dysfunction for months, not days, not hours, not days. So that's why we are absolutely Nazi about these types of oils. Now, before you would go to restaurants and they typically used olive oil or butter, you know, natural types of oils. Now they use denatured oils. That's why vegetable oil is so dangerous. Sounds healthy, vegetable oil, but it's adulterated, rancid. There's a lot of different words, but the point for you all is this is dangerous for you, and it's not a danger that just comes and goes. So the danger is accumulative. The danger builds up. all of a sudden it is causing fatigue. It's causing hormone disruption. It's linked in studies to many different things. And yet, even when we go to dinner with healthy people, they're not paying attention to it. You know, so if they just, I always say, if they knew what I knew, they too would be allergic to vegetable oil and canola oil overnight.
Yeah. And guys, the reason why Merily will tell the wait staff, or oftentimes we'll call before we even go to make sure, right?
Yeah.
And there's more restaurants that will accommodate you than you.
Well, yeah, no, we go out to eat all
sure.
the time. So it's
Right.
like, we just have to know the question to ask, and that's really cool.
So the reason why Merily will say, I'm allergic, is because then they will be sure. They don't want somebody leaving their restaurant with an allergic reaction.
Right.
They will be sure that Merily gets what she asks for,
Right.
instead of getting what it is that they actually normally.
Because it's not just the oil in the pan, right? It's more about the things that, you know, are prepped for the meal, right? So that does, and it does change where we prefer eating, even in nicer restaurants. There's some nicer restaurants that have things sous vide in advance, but if they're going to opt me out of that and prepare it differently, I'm not going to have as much of an enjoyable experience. So I'm going to go somewhere where I can make those.
And there's
adaptations.
a caution. Somehow when you put canola and vegetable oil on, everybody thinks it also means olive oil. So you also have to state, but I'm good with olive oil. And when you're in Mexico, we learned this. You start with the positive. I love olive oil. I'm great with olive oil, but I can't have vegetable oil, canola oil.
They hear what you say
They hear
first,
what you say
right?
first.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you learn to work around it.
Yeah.
So that was one. We only
So,
covered one.
I think another important thing is to avoid GMOs at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah,
That's
Love
huge.
about that. I love to hear about that. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, because see, genetically modified organisms, they're very destructive, right? And there's typically a chemical called glyphosate sprayed on them. As a matter of fact, most things, corn and soy oil, or corn and soy products, unless it says 100% organic, is GMO, which means they're genetically modified to basically take a spray in very high amounts called glyphosate. Oh, the company that developed glyphosate also is the company who developed GMOs to handle their spray.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. So but the problem with this chemical is, and it's being used in our food supply, it's 60% of our rainfall has it in it. But the point is it opens up your gut barrier. It creates food sensitivities, food intolerances, autoimmune, all of these eating problems and digestive problems that many people have. And it also causes leaky brain. So it's linked to a lot of now ADD, brain conditions, etc. So glyphosate is the cause. Listen, you can avoid a food because you go, I don't do well with that, or maybe my kid's not doing well with that, or maybe I should run this test to see what foods he's intolerant to. First off, all of that may be fine, but the important thing is getting rid of the causative factor. If a chemical opens up your gut, that's creating, so let's say you're avoiding these 9 foods because you realize you're reacting to it. You'll avoid those for a month. In a month, you'll be reacting to the next 9 foods that you started to eat because your gut is leaky. These things are going across the gut. The chemical causes it. Stay away from GMO and stay away from the glyphosate chemical that I said.
Amen.
And I would also say, if we're talking diet, important to eat grass-fed meat whenever possible.
So that's the third thing. That's
Right.
the third thing. Why grass-fed?
Love that.
Because, and again, these are simple things you can do with your family. I mean, you can start this now, today, tomorrow. You know, grass-fed, why is that investment worth it? Well, if you get it from a local farmer, maybe it's not even that much difference in price. Because, again, the importance of fats, and I'm not going to bore you with a scientific lecture on it, but fats are really important for your cells, for your brain, for how you feel, for your hormones. So when the cow eats grass, the ratios of fats are perfect. When a cow eats grain, it throws off the ratio. When a cow eats grain, you have to give them antibiotics and different things, etc., because they're not healthy. Cows are meant to eat grass. So therefore, there's a consequence to it. So once again, Merily gave a principle in the beginning that if we eat things the way God intended them to, that's a simple principle and a major premise that you can run your family by. So if you do eat dairy, then you have to watch, because man can take a really healthy God food and make it bad. A cow eating grain makes it bad. A cow eating grain and then you're taking the dairy, that makes it bad, right? So, you know, you just have to apply that principle and eat it the way it was meant to be. So raw grass-fed meat. or not
That's like A1. You ever see A1 milk in the store now? Like a lot of the stores carry it now.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a typical grass-fed type of
But it's not raw,
type of cow that's really good for you.
Right. Yeah. Look, I mean, and there's stages of healthy, right? You know, raw milk is the way it was intended, and there's all types of enzymes. At some states you can't get it. Here you can. Okay. Then you have organic milk, is I would say a next stage. And I'm doing the same thing with cheese, right? So, you know, raw, the best. Organic, next best. Well, no, I would say organic, grass-fed, right? And then just organic. So go down that hierarchy, you know, and it makes it a lot easier. And here's a fourth rule. When you're going into a health food store or any store, it gets very confusing. I used to be able to like tell you, oh, these chemicals, stay away from this, stay away from this. Okay, here's an easier principle for y'all. If you can't read it, don't eat it. Meaning that you read it and go, I can't even read it. Don't eat it, because those are man-made chemicals, right? So start with that. Be cautious of canola oil. Be cautious of vegetable oil. It's in a lot of food and health food stores. And if you can't read it, don't eat it.
And organic.
Go grass-fed.
Organic fruits and vegetables, I think, are also very important.
Because then you don't get the glyphosate. If it's not organic, you're getting the glyphosate. Okay, what if you're on a budget? Okay, because that was number 5, go organic, right? What if you're on a budget? Then you can Google the Dirty Dozen. And Joe, I've heard you talk about it, right? The Dirty Dozen. You know, it's like, don't eat those, right? Things like avocado, thicker skin things, you can eat non-organic. It's not dangerous, but make no exception with the Dirty Dozen. Buy those organic.
And if you're taking care of your body and you're still not functioning well, then you need to look upstream at other sources of potential infection and other causes of places where the body could be harboring illness. I mean, now that's more of a sleuthing process.
Yeah.
We were talking about that before, but so, you know, there's always a reason why the body malfunctions. Obviously the goal is to keep it from malfunctioning, but we live in a very toxic world, and we're exposed to a lot of things we don't have control over. So the really big things and the important things to stand on, you must stand. You have to stand. You get one body, one chance to live it healthfully. If your brain isn't working, if your body isn't functioning well, if you have aches and pains, it changes everything about the way you view your life and your family. And we know that because we've lived through that. And, you know, and we will never not stay 100% focused on our major premise, because that all out, like he said, all else follows underneath it. And if we have that, we have everything.
You're so right. You're right. You know, I'll oftentimes ask people, you know, what do you think is the most important pillar of the 7 pillars of a successful life, being professional life, family life, spirituality, finances, intellect, social, physical fitness, health. And what they'll tell me is finances or family. And I'm like, well, those things are really great and they're really important. But if you're lacking your health, how can you take care of your family? How about when you retire? How many people do you see, you know, they go down fast after they retire? They've worked their entire lives to save up for this moment in time to be able to live their life, and now it's taken from them. They can't think, or they can't function, you know. And the worst thing for me, like, I'm watching this whole I don't know what I should say, COVID thing play out. And I'm watching these seniors die in nursing homes all by themselves. And when people do have to go to the hospital, they're left to fend for themselves because they don't even have a loved one to stand there and help them to navigate through these health issues when doctors are, you know, throwing all of this mumbo jumbo at them that they don't understand, this lingo, this medical lingo that they have no idea. And it's getting more and more confusing, and we're getting more and more toxic. So we have to pay more and more attention to things like what you guys are talking about, because it will might it, but it will catch up with us.
And you wonder why and how fear is driving the boat, right? It's so, when you are so overwhelmed and you are hearing all this information, and it's just baffling to me. I was in the Apple store today, baffled by the attitudes, the jump back, you know, the touching wiping with a new fresh wipe on every part of my computer that I might have touched before he touched. You know, on the way out the door, people hand sanitizing. I haven't used a hand sanitizer one time in my whole entire life, and neither have my children. In fact, I was so against triclosan, I told Deb, I said, I think it's a cruel joke that this word hand sanitizer is in my face everywhere I go in public. I'm so offended by it. It's like soap and freaking water.
And by the way, people throw out the thing, the CDC, I remembered pulling it when they said, oh, guess what? It doesn't work. All the hand sanitizer, the sterilization, you know, it doesn't work. I'm like, well, what happened with that? Like, what was that? I pulled that, you know, what the CDC said about that after their review. What happened with that? Gone. Anyway, I don't want to get this thing shut down. We better change it.
So here's a question for you too. So I think so often people are hearing this and they're saying, you guys make it sound so easy. You make it sound so simple because you're in it, you're doing it, right? It's almost like, well, they have a $10 million company. They make it sound easy because they're doing it already. And so they just kind of throw it off to the wind because it seems unattainable. You know, what I've learned is that for people, there's a decision to make, right? It simply comes down to a decision. And it's decisions you make every single day. And you have to draw a line in the sand because either you're going to have the pain of doing what you do and having an outcome, or you're going to have the pain of making a choice and being healthier. Either way, you're going to have the same discomfort. It's just a matter of what decision do you want to choose and where do you want to choose it.
That's right.
And for everybody out there that's listening, this is the turning point when you could say, I want to live better and healthier because I want to be going this way in my health, not that way in my health.
I have a great quote. Our pastor a few weeks ago said this great quote on stage. If you don't practice what you believe, eventually you will believe what you practice.
Oh, say that again. Can you say that?
Yeah. If you don't practice what you believe, eventually you will believe what you practice. When you dumb it down enough, when you make it not important long enough, it doesn't become important anymore. So decide what's important, stand on your premise, live by that premise, teach your children. And I'll tell you what, even if you forget, your children will remind you.
Let me leave one note. I want to leave on this note right there because the word you said, decide, and both of you said it. When you look at people who changed the world, when you look at people who made the greatest differences, when you look at people who survived some incurable disease, when they're interviewed, they always said, you know, at a certain point, I just made a decision that I wasn't going to live my life like that anymore. Someone who overcomes the drug addiction, you know, I just made a decision that I was just going to make a difference. And it comes down to a decision. We call those 3%ers. 3%ers, they just one day make a decision, meaning they have fear. They have a lot of excuses, I'm sure, at one point, but they made a decision to, you know, just to move past it. 97%, unfortunately, they pay attention to their fears. They give in to their excuses. They start to believe their excuses. So you can choose to be a 3%er. Everything that we said, we're in our mid-50s. You know, we've chosen to live the rest of our life healthier than the first part. And I'll tell you, what scares me about the generations now is they have more degenerative diseases than any generation ever. Autoimmune, cancer, you name it. You name the degenerative condition. We are now seeing it in teenagers and 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds. The autoimmune is just going through the roof. You can make a decision not to become one of the statistics. Simple as that.
And just to push this one step further, the more generations we have of degeneration, of illness, of dysfunction, the more we will perpetuate this motion going forward. The more people will be sick. And I have these kids coming in my office now more than I've ever seen that are 2, 3, 4 years old, babies that are spitting up to such an extent that they can't thrive. Moms can't breastfeed, they're not producing milk. Kids are neurologically damaged. There's a lot of stuff going on. They're not walking and talking at 3, 4 years old. There's something wrong. There's something wrong, and this should not be acceptable. And if you are out there and you're thinking about having children one day, before the day that you decide to have those kids, you need to figure out how to get healthy so you can have healthy children. It starts before you get pregnant.
If you know someone out there that this message is going to resonate with, do me a favor, share it. I think this is important. This gets shared around because there are people out there that need to hear this and want to hear this. And I think it's so important that this message gets shared over and over, especially as we go through the 7 pillars, because we have some amazing people coming on in the next 6 weeks after this. I cannot thank the Pompas for coming on today and just spilling their heart and their wisdom. It's been awesome. I cherish our friendship, and I cherish your knowledge. And I'm just so blessed and honored to walk life with you guys. And it means the world to us.
Yes, it does. And we love and appreciate all that you guys do. And I want to share what you do with those who are watching. If you could tell them about some of the, well, first of all, you have Cellular Healing TV.
Which is great.
Yeah, if you just go to cellularhealing.tv, it brings you right to my podcast.
Awesome.
And that's an easy way. I mean, so many topics. I almost 400 different episodes. So, there's a lot there. But, and you can go to pompasolutions.com. That's a program. If you have more challenges, I would say go there. If you just want to learn more about some of these topics, go to the cellularhealing.tv. But pompasolutions.com will give you a greater learning if you have challenges.
Yeah, guys, what they do works. We know that firsthand.
Good stuff.
Yes, and we know many people that have gone through the program and had great, abundant success. So thank you guys again for
love you.
And thank you to all of our viewers. We love you and appreciate you. And don't forget to check us out again next Monday. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night. He wants to talk somewhere.